Hello and good evening. I wanted to do a follow-up on the glue-up that I did yesterday of the Native American style flute that I'm building from a kit from Blue Bear Flutes. But before I get into that, I want to say I finished the book in one day. I read it cover to cover. This is The Art of Native American Flute Making by Charlie and Jesse Matatoyela. What a great book. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I've never read another book on Native American flute making, so I don't have anything to compare it to. But what I will say is that I enjoyed so much of this. I'll probably do a separate review at some point on the book itself, but if you're interested at all in Native American flute making or how they're made, even if you don't want to make one, this is a very interesting book and there's a lot of great stuff in here. It also dives into a little bit of history, philosophy, all kinds of things. So really great book, love it. All right, so just from a basic visual inspection, it looks like everything came together nicely. I'm just going to start popping clamps off and see what we've got. I'm hoping I didn't apply too much clamping pressure and crack anything. If I did, it's my own fault. So, yeah, first of all, I don't see any cracks front or back, and it looks like the seams came together pretty well. You might see some shadows on the camera because there's a slight bit of overlap there. It's not quite even here. The top of it slightly overhangs the bottom here, and vice versa, the bottom slightly juts out. That was a consequence of when I aligned the hole here. Because these would have been cut probably at two separate times. But that's okay. That's not going to affect anything negatively. And once I sand this all down, I'll take it to my belt sander and round it off. I have a lathe, but for one thing, well, I could put a plug in there and I could stick it on my lathe. And after I drill the air hole here, I could put a plug in and stick it on my lathe. Not glue in the plugs, obviously, just something that sits in there, just friction chuck. I may do that, or I may not, but I think my lathe is maybe just a little bit too short for this. I have a very small lathe. But if I sanded this down on the belt sander, I think I would find that those glue joints are just perfect. In fact, let me grab a piece of sandpaper quickly. This is some 60 grit sandpaper, so it likes to crunch and crack. Every 60 grit sandpaper I've ever used crunches and cracks. But because it's cedar, I might be able to get down to the glue joint fairly quickly. Oh, it smells just wonderful. Oh, cedar, it's lovely. Ooh, made a noise when I blew into it. Yeah, so I didn't get all the way down there. I'd have to sand it a bit more, but the glue joints look really good. And if there's any subtle gapping in here when I'm done, and I don't think there will be, but if there is, I'll just put a little bit of thin CA glue in there, and that'll take care of it. So yeah, as far as I can tell, the glue up was a success. So I'll go on to my next step, which will be working on the sound making part here. So the track and the cutting edge, splitting edge, fipple, whatever you want to call it, as well as drilling or burning or both a hole in the end here to get the sound into or get the air into the slow air chamber. So I don't know, that might have to wait for the weekend, but so far I am happy. I love this little knot here too. I love knots in wood. I love wavy grain, so I'm excited.